Bloodlines, Illuminati, back in print, available at Infowars.com right now. Fritz, since you wanted to get into Nazi Germany and parallels to how Hitler took over to what's happening here today, I thought I would just first talk about the incredible police state we live under. And because it's been done incrementally, it's like, well, yeah, they will secretly arrest you and kill you, but that's not a police state. Look at this crazy guy, Alex Jones, Mother Jones says. Alex Jones doesn't like torture or secret arrest. I mean, he's a loon, Fritz Springmeier.
Yes. Thank you for the privilege to be on your show. And this is a great topic today because it's something that's affecting all of us. It's this police state. And I just want to build upon what you've been talking about in the last 10 minutes, which was you did such a good job of describing all of these things that are happening around us, you know, like the FEMA Corps and the rest. If we don't look at history, and I love history, I love to go back and examine things. If we don't look at history, as they say, then we're forced to repeat it. We have a good example of how a police state can be created successfully. The Nazis needed a consensus for their government to work, and yet a large share of the German people had strong reservations about the policies of the Nazis. They didn't believe their cosmology and a lot of their other
they were force-fed it.
Yeah, and what was the bottom line, the main tool that the Nazis were able to establish that gave them the social control to carry out their policies? And what it turns out is when you examine things, and the same dynamics are working today, and you've been describing some of them, the same dynamics that allowed the Nazis to have success are happening today, and those are what I wanted to talk about. The most important tool that they had was denunciation. Now, another popular word would be snitching, but snitching has the connotation that you're actually informing the police on a real criminal. So I want to use the word denunciation, and that is where you become an informant, where citizens are turned into the eyes and ears of the police state, and they start turning in people as a thought police. That's what happened in Nazi Germany. And how did they manage to get that to happen? And how is it happening here in this country? My son in 1990 was going to a Protestant school, and I found out that he was secretly being taught in the classroom in a Christian parochial school, nonetheless, to spy on his parents. And when I asked the teacher, well, who started all of this? She said, well, she got her training at Monmouth Teachers College, at the Teachers College here in Oregon, and that's how they train the teachers. So even in Christian schools, the teachers are being trained and certified by the state, and they already, for quite a few years, have been training our students to spy on their adults. Having been in prison, I'm very conversant with the prison population, and I can categorically, without a doubt, say that the majority of convictions, the majority of indictments and convictions being done in this country are being done on the basis of tip-offs, denunciation, snitching. It is not done by police investigation.
No, they have child molesters and murderers who will go call out a preacher with no record, and the jury sends them to jail. I mean, they use professional liars who are known criminals to testify.
Right. There was even a company to help them do that. It was called Conviction Consultants Incorporated. You would rent a rat, and the government would pay these rats about $250,000 to come in and lie through this company, Conviction Consultants.
Yeah, that's how they do it. I mean, they could, folks. You just have to understand, this system has no credibility. The Dallas police have been caught just pulling people over, throwing bags of chalk in their back of their car randomly to take their property. They're not even ripping off drug dealers. Author, researcher, Fritz Springmeier is our guest. He's breaking down how the Nazis were able to do a couple things. Bully the general public into shutting up via fear and peer pressure of being shouted down, but also get the military and the police structure to follow orders incrementally. And they firebombed the Reichstag building shortly after Hitler got elected, and then used that to get more power. He didn't get elected with a majority vote, though. He got into one of the houses of parliaments, because they have a president and a chancellor. And then after the Reichstag, and von Hindenburg was sick and had a stroke, then they merged the two, and he became the Fuhrer to keep everybody safe from the terrorists that blew up the Capitol. Blow up the Capitol, become supreme ruler. So that's why you've always got to look when somebody blows up the Capitol. Okay, who stands to gain from this one? But Hermann Goering was there within minutes. Of course, he was the one running around with the troops pouring gasoline everywhere. It later was declassified. Running around to catch the bad guy, a homeless person they drugged and had naked, screaming and yelling, who supposedly broke into the whole Capitol and poured gasoline and incendiary weapons everywhere. And again, it's this following orders. Hitler also created the SA that was like a goon force of not really police and military, because they couldn't get the police and military early on to do all the stuff they wanted, who would just go beat you up as a gang, or who would then enforce on you. And, of course, he culled those guys after he fully came to power. And the establishment actually liked that, because they were disgusted by the TSA-type folks. But that's what this is all about. And they just create a culture. Look at all the cop shows, all the movies where the cops are always good, the FBI is always good. There might be government corruption, but it's a rogue group. No, the people on top are the crooks. Then you do have good people in police and FBI at the lower levels generally. But they're compartmentalized, need to know. And look at Fast and Furious. Look at what that shows us. Shipping guns into Mexico. The media's like, why? It wasn't just selling them at gun shops. It was shipping them to Mexico. It was giving them to drug gangs in Florida. It was giving them to groups in Illinois and Texas, and running stings with fake IDs that were real IDs, but fake issued by the government, to shut down people legally selling guns. They just want to shut down good people. They want to dominate. Going back to Fritz Springmeier, you were bringing this up because of all the subjects you could have raised today. I think this is a good one you picked, but why raise this point? Well,
I'm building upon, there's a whole bunch of things that you said that I can build upon.
Go.
One of the earlier things that you mentioned was about magazines and so forth, and that's what happened in Nazi Germany too, is that they used so-called public magazines and newspapers to start this social control. If you were a German woman and you had sex with a Jewish man, why then the local newspaper that was run by the Nazi party would come out and they would call you a Schandmädchen, which means a sinning woman, a woman of shame, and they would print your name in the paper. Well, how many of us have gone through the grocery store, and as you're going through the checkout stand, look up there at the gossip rags. You see the same things happening here, is that people are being surrounded.
Now they have magazines everywhere and weeklies called Busted and stuff, where they put all the citizens arrested, not convicted, in there so they can be publicly pilloried. Exactly. They're getting us used to this gladiatorial event where it's entertaining to see our fellow citizens pilloried.
Yes, exactly. All going along the same program that brought the Nazi success. If we look at a couple statistics of the Gestapo, it's very revealing. If we look at Dusseldorf, which was a city in Germany, the statistics for the Gestapo from 1933 to 1944, only 15% of the legal or their police proceedings that they would start were started on the basis of police actually seeing something happen. All the rest was based upon reports from snitches and other agencies public agencies that would snitch for them.
That's why even when they report, I saw a new article about this today, neighbor sees a gun, they just go ahead and send the police to somebody's house, and the guy's in there cleaning the gun in his garage, and they'll shoot him, or they'll tell him come out and then call a SWAT team, and then they're like, but my gun's not illegal. It's like, it doesn't matter. You know, somebody called, the doctor called, you weren't vaccinating your children. Well, there's no law against that. Well, the state police are still here. We're going to have to take your child into custody. They may be in danger, but there's no law. They have to have a shot. We're taking your child. Well, where's the warrant? We're taking your child. Again, they're just getting us used to not following a law, and tattletaling is taken like a golden sacrament from heaven because they want to encourage this. The only power you have as a citizen is to snitch, and that is a godlike power now that must be worshipped.
Yeah, so well said. I was watching television. I don't watch a lot of television, but I saw this lady that was, there was a news story on her. She was being heralded as a heroine in the television news. And what had she done? Well, there had been a group of men in a car that had driven up to a gas station. They were dressed like any Americans, but their complexion looked Arab. And she called the police because these Arab-looking complected men had driven up to the gas station, and she was being heralded as a heroine. I mean, talk about something that's so blatantly against what this country was founded upon, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. They were totally opposite of where they're taking people, where you're a hero for calling in someone because they look like they're Arabs. Wow. Another interesting thing that I noticed from history, because I was studying Warsaw. Warsaw was a city in Poland where the Nazis established what was called a ghetto. They moved Jews from all over Poland and other places into Warsaw, and then later they moved those Jews to concentration camps. And I would ask people, the listeners out there, how many Gestapo do you think it took to move something like, and I don't remember the exact statistics, but ballpark figures, maybe 500,000 Jewish people out of the Warsaw ghetto in a whole series of moves? How many? Well, it was only a dozen. Something like a dozen Gestapo police were all that were needed. And the reason why is because all they did was oversee what the local Jewish police did, the local Jewish police that the Jewish people would.
That's right. That's what George Soros was in Romania, and he did an interview 15 years ago, for 60 Minutes. And by the way, they've removed it everywhere. You can find the transcripts and short clips. And he said it's one of the best times of his life, as a quote. And then that's hailed. And then when Glenn Beck dare criticize him as being a collaborator with the Nazis, the ADL said that was anti-Semitic. So see, if you actually helped Nazis round people up, you are loving and of goodness. But if you're not a Nazi, then the Jewish groups say you are. I mean, again, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible just how evil this system is. And but it was also the compliance. I've watched the footage of communists, Seventh-day Adventists, so many groups, Jews. I mean, they just killed Russians, and all of them. Well, the Russians started fighting back because they figured out, hey, this guy, first they thought it was a liberator. They hated Stalin so much. Then they found out, wow, this is even worse. But you've all seen the footage of the men would put their hat in their hand and say thank you to the soldiers and run in and be shot. The women would walk in with their babies and be shot. And then I'm a weirdo because that's not happening with me. See, that's not happening. And you see people not resisting. There actually was some resistance in the Warsaw Ghetto. But there wasn't much resistance against Pol Pot in Cambodia. The good news is, Fritz, 5 million guns a month being sold, an all-time record, and people say it's because they don't trust the government. So I don't think it's going to go that way in America, Fritz.
Yeah, there have been some positive things happen, like back in May 2000 in Canada, the people discovered that there was this huge data bank that Canada's Human Resources was keeping on people, their Human Resources Department. They had given it this long name, Longitudinal Labor Force Files. That's so typical of our government to come up with these large names. Anyway, the Canadian people, within that month, got that stopped and shut down. So there have been instances of where the people said, no, we're not going to take this. And you can look through history and see those events happening. And of course, we're not taught the class Risk-Taking 101 when we go to school. So how do we take risk? How do we step out and not just be reactive, but how do we be proactive like you are being on your show, Well, first, we have to get beyond our fears, because fears become self-fulfilling prophecies. Defensive thinking is rooted in the past. We have to move forward, be proactive, and we need to have faith. We need to have hope. These are the kind of things that I really want to encourage people to have, is faith and hope. So that they'll move forward. And we're forced to take risk in life. You know that. All of us are forced to take risks. So what do? Do we run back to our fears and try to have security? Helen Keller said that security is mostly just a superstition. It doesn't exist in nature, she said. She said life is a daring adventure. And I dare to say, that's what you and I have been embarked on, is a daring adventure. And we have our rough moments. I know that you've had your rough moments. I've had my rough moments. But I would rather do that than to crawl on my knees and lick the hand and kiss the feet of the people that want to rule us with this tyranny.
Fritz, just continuing here, do you think we can turn the tide against this? What's your gut? Because I do see people waking up, but I don't see them really then taking action, though. And by that I mean we need to boldly call this system out and totally discredit it, because just like they want to shout us down, it is a battle of wills. They're so immoral and so openly criminal that if we just expose them and say no and resist with non-compliance, they're not going to get away with it. They need our compliance.
Exactly. They do need the general public's compliance if they're going to operate effectively. And that's why they continue to have the charade that we elect our presidents. We don't select, nor do we elect our presidents. The process has been totally hijacked. But as long as we continue to be fooled into thinking that we select these criminals to run this country, people will continue, like the church, oh, well, we have to obey the legal authorities. Well, excuse me, but these authorities are no longer legal. They're illegal, To put me into prison, they probably broke 20 or 30 laws easily. Laws that carried far more time in prison than what they put me in prison for. But nobody's going to call people to task for what was being done, jury tampering, blah, 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 But the thing of it is people need to stand up and be good people. Good people will stand up and maybe you're asking me, are we going to be successful? I don't know if we are or aren't, but I do know that we have a choice to make as to what kind of person we're going to be. Are we going to be the punk? That's a prison term. Are we going to be punked by these power-hungry people? Or are we going to have the dignity of being decent human people that say, hey, this is not right, and it isn't right, and like you say, calling them out. understand the dynamic of power here, and I know you know, Alex, is that power generally demolishes the user's character, and so it corrupts. Total power totally corrupts, and we see these people, some of them may have had some decency to them before they got power, but afterwards, even these petty bureaucrats, you know,
well, that's my next point. That's my next point. Knowing the Illuminati and what they're into at the deepest levels running this, I know they're in control of society. They're trying to get greater control. They're not in total control, but they're not in control of themselves. And from what I've read, what I've researched, what I've seen, what a lot of experts have said is that the Illuminati of 50 years ago, 100 years ago, was more focused, more dedicated, more professional. And that there's been blowback, and more careful, I would add, blowback of the drugging and the electromagnetic and this culture of death, and that the highest levels of the elite are becoming more and more decadent, and they don't have a lot of really hardworking people at the top anymore, like David Rockefeller. And that's why we're seeing such crazy GMO getting out and even hurting the elite. Reactors, 9 out of 10 leaking. The elite don't care. You know, they wouldn't let the troops use DU until 1990. Now they let them use it. It's killing them. I mean, they've really gotten a craziness to them now where they're just acting like they want to destroy everything. Is there a method to that madness?
Yes, there is, and you're correct. There's a lot of madness behind it. That's one reason why in their plans, they plan to use technocrats, people that are highly skilled, you know, your scientist who doesn't care who's funding him as long as he has a job to do his research. And these technocrats are going to run the New World Order for them because they're not looking at the bigger picture and thinking, what am I subscribing to? And that goes back to Nazi Germany again. Most of the Gestapo police were not hardcore Nazi party members. Now, eventually, they got integrated into the Nazi party, but even then, the majority of them didn't have their heart in what the Nazi party stood for.
Well, I've read in most of the major mainline German reports, I mean, this isn't propaganda, it's what they themselves wrote. Heinrich Himmler and others, when they would go out and tour a death camp, would vomit and would throw up and not want to see it. Hitler never wanted to look at it either. They just scientifically said, we're going to do this, and then ordered people to do it. And that most of the top Nazis would gag and throw up. But it was all part of acting tough, and they were willing to do it, and they were punching the buttons. I want all you phony environmentalists to know something. Your carbon taxes will kill billions of people on record. If you want to get the amazing book, it's a coffee table book, huge documents, photos. I read this thing, I don't know, 15 years ago and couldn't believe it. And then over the years, so much of what I read in the book, I ended up seeing in the mainstream news later. First person ever said that the House of Windsor isn't even German, but Transylvanian, basically. That's mainstream news now. Turns out Prince Charles is hopping around in the woods of Transylvania part of the time and is into Dracula and all this stuff. That's all in his book. Bloodlines, the Illuminati, Fritz Springmeier, Infowars.com, or 888-253-3139 to call. We also have some combo deals where you can get my films that relate to it along with it. Fritz, we got one more little short segment with you. I look forward to having you back on soon on whatever subject you want to raise next time, but other points you want to get at here.
Okay, building upon the social control, one of the effects of the social control has been to hide a lot of the solutions that would give people hope. The torus is a donut shape, and it's the shape of energy fields like the magnetic field, tornadoes, the galaxy. I would go so far as to say the shape of the universe is a torus. The torus has been used by inventors to create free energy machines, but all of this has been suppressed. Another thing that's been suppressed by their social control, even to the extent of murdering people that come up with these alternative medical solutions. There's a lot of research. There's research into how to reverse the aging process by supporting the telomeres. That's the end of the DNA. Hold
on, I want to hear that. Back in 60 seconds. That's another example, and then Max Kaiser's coming on, of how the system ridicules you. The Soviets did it, the Nazis did it. They use medical systems as a tyranny. So it's admitted there's radiation poisoning, but because you are trying to get medical help, they're just going to say you're mentally ill. And that's on record. They said we were mentally ill, that there was high levels of radiation, and they got caught lying. So it's another example of that. I want to have you back up in a few weeks to just do an hour on solutions and get into all the suppressed technologies and things. But as you mentioned decades ago, they now admit they can reverse the aging process in insects and rodents and humans. The elites, how far advanced are they technologically from your sources inside the Illuminati that we know? Because it's obvious they've got a breakaway civilization, but what can we prove, Fritz?
Well, I know of cases, and I don't know the reason why it's very selective, but there are selective individuals that are actually living hundreds of years. They're living transgenerational, but this is a very guarded secret, and I don't think I've ever said what I just said publicly, because they're pretty sensitive about that particular issue. So they do have. And actually, from what I know, there are things out there to give us healthy lives. We should all be living to at least 100 years old productively. But of course, as you so aptly demonstrate, they keep poisoning us, and they keep taking away our nutrition from our food and from our soil. They're working overtime to try to steal our health. And it seems like our culture is cooperating with that. Again, we have that Gleichschaltung that helped the Nazis carry out their programs and agendas. Yeah, I'd love to be back. Thanks for having me, Alex.
You bet. Get more into the fact that they said that 96% of DNA was junk. Of course, they knew that wasn't the case. It's an antenna. Even mainline science is now saying that. Right. Years ago, they ridiculed the telomeres on the end of the DNA, and I was really upset because I have faith in God, and I know that He didn't design this body and create something that was worthless in there. And I didn't know what the answer were for the telomeres, but finally three scientists got a Nobel Prize for regressing. They age-regressed mice from 80 human years back to 50 human years, showing that the telomeres could be supported, and they discovered what the telomeres were all about. There's other things, stem cell research. I could go on and on about different medical advances, but the general public is not being told about. And I just encourage the listeners, our listeners out there, your listeners are like diamonds in the rough, and I just encourage them to, on their own, start investigating all of the suppressed technology and all these suppressed medical methods that could bring them, help them become self-sufficient and taking care of themselves. That's right. Get out of the system, and that means mentally. Start investigating. Don't even believe what we're saying. Just start investigating on your own. Start being wily. Be skeptical. Thank you so much, Fritz Springmeier. Bloodlines, the Illuminati, available at Infowars.com. We'll talk to you soon. Dr. Doug Rocky, straight ahead.